Hey there. So I was thinking about the con in Con Man lately. It's obviously about confidence. The con man sells you something false, empty, or non existent. Snake oil, Trump steaks, Trump University. But those were the wares he offered when he was merely a grifter on the economic stage. His power to promise and fail to deliver has multiplied and metastasized as he gained actual political power when a plurality of voters actually chose him to lead our nation in 2016 and obviously again in 2024. I keep hearing how 2025 is going to be a better economy in settings where people don't want to talk about politics, but they're alluding to things getting better because Trump was just elected. They don't want to start a battle or an argument. Even though this didn't bear out in his first term, they believe this. And since Musk and his other benefactors won't let him tank the economy to please his racist base, I can only imagine it'll be more of the same tough talk and empty promises. Clearly, the ultra wealthy run Trump and prefer the policies of Biden and Obama and kind of all those neoliberal presidents. And so we'll have more neoliberalism sprinkled with Trump's attempts to tear down entitlements and the regulatory state, which would also obviously please the ultra wealthy. But what people want is a quick fix of confidence, a reason to trust that the economy will be okay, even as they vote against their own interests. And to that extent, Trump has delivered, even in a cesspool of bluster and mixed with lies and bad ideas. That's him delivering. That's what they wanted. And I'll get back to that a little bit more later. Who could be more polar opposite of Donald Trump, you might ask? A true Christian, a tireless worker, a devoted husband, a family man, a soldier, a farmer, a nuclear engineer, and an honest man. Well, that would be former President Jimmy Carter. Carter died yesterday. I was discussing his life and presidency with some friends at the gym as the news came up on the screen when we were lifting. And I came to the conclusion that the narrative around his presidency was overly criticized. And just the same as I always thought Reagan's was falsely inflated. PBS mentioned a speech where Carter spoke of a crisis in confidence, and I watched this speech last night. It's an interesting speech to watch and read all these 48 years later, as I'm about to be 50. An honest man shared what his constituents had told him about the economy, energy crisis, inflation, high interest rates, and Iran hostages. You see me slump there because all those things were happening at once. People were freaking out. It was a giant shitstorm. And maybe Carter didn't have enough for all the answers for those moments. This is also in the wake of Watergate and Vietnam, where we lost almost 60,000 soldiers and killed more than 2 million people, some say 3 million people, in Southeast Asia. And obviously, Watergate was this absolute crisis in confidence. We couldn't even trust our president. And the stuff that happened in Watergate, would seem silly now, but that was a big deal. Our nation was lost in a morass of political corruption, Watergate, endless war, Vietnam, and economic stagnation. A nation that had lost its innocence in the 60s was losing its trust that our government could shepherd us through changing economic times. The economies that we had destroyed in World War II were catching up to us when we didn't have an answer. Gas lines, high interest rates, and the formerly prosperous middle class suffered as a result. Suffered mightily. A deeper dive into the complexities of the economics and politics that informed presidency under Carter is like needed, and I can't do that. I'm not a presidential historian. I'm not an economist, so I'm not here to say, hey, let me tell you all about Carter. I was born the year before Carter became president, and I'm just a guy on YouTube, with opinions and insights, and that's what I'm bringing here. So, talking about why Carter failed or wasn't successful is above my pay grade. But I know Carter was a good man, and he came to power in tough times, and perhaps he wasn't a great leader. He was definitely too honest, too serious, and too scolding, and that crisis in confidence speech was scolding. He, seemed humorless at times too. But some of the guys at the gym and I were saying, yeah, there was the last honest president, for better and for worse. So he was too ethical to rouse the populace with false promises like some other people do. He had zero guile, zero. He couldn't inspire American citizens to trust the economy and to trust that it would turn around. So they left him for a man that they believed, a man that told them what they wanted to hear. And this was another con man. Proto Trump is what I like to call him, a wolf in sheep's clothing. His name was Ronald Reagan. He was a far better orator than Carter, and it showed in their debates. And I remember as a kid, I'm getting a little older there, so Reagan was president when I was from 5 to 15. So I remember that guy. That's the president to me growing up. That's what he looked like. That's what he sounded like. And he was presidential in his demeanor. Reagan had an answer for everything Carter threw his way in that debate, too. So Carter was absolutely outmatched. And Reagan had a firm grip on the narrative. It was absolute horseshit, but it sounded good. And it felt good. And it inspired confidence. A shining city on the hill. Even if his actual prescriptions wouldn't actually take us there. Reagan made our nation's key issues worse. Higher taxes for the middle class and the wealth gap exploded. Deregulation of key industries, arcane drug laws, and mass incarceration. But he used pageantry to pretend he single-handedly tore down the Berlin Wall. And I remember it well. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. It sounded great. It was absolutely movie magic. And he was an actor. He managed his image really well. When he was caught selling arms to Iran with drug money from Central America, he didn't recall. And, he was a B-movie Hollywood actor who finally found the role that he could portray effectively. A grandfatherly anti-communist moralist who could blame all the ills of our manufacturing collapse on welfare queens and the gay lifestyle. And it was time for his accountability. He was a doddering old man with memory issues. Can you feel my absolute lack of love for Reagan? But fast forward now, let's say to 50 years to now. And we have an economy that works really, really well for the very few. Regular people have legitimate financial concerns about affordability, employment, healthcare, retirement, and so on. But a new con man has them believing that the previous administration is corrupt and feckless when it was actually pretty successful by and large, even if the prosperity didn't reach the middle class and the lower rungs of the workforce substantially enough. At least the administration fixed our roads and bridges and lowered drug prices and addressed lots of glaring issues that have been piling up since the collective malfeasance of Reagan and Nixon and the Bushes. And maybe I think too some of these good things that Biden did will bear out during Trump and following administrations, and they'll definitely take credit for it, like presidents do of both parties. Trump has them convinced that the economy will get better despite things that don't make economies better, like really high tariffs and migrant camps and other terrible policies. But attaining their confidence was the point. The demagogue first distorts, then decries the ills of the status quo to varying degrees of accuracy. He then sells the solution, himself. He peddles a fantasy to the people, a people so fully disillusioned about American government and their ability to afford a good life that they would support a criminal, failed casino-owning wannabe autocrat. Such is the disconnect from reason, such is the desperation. I'm sensing that each president ends up being the mouthpiece for neoliberalism and the big international businesses that it serves. And Carter couldn't do that. He just couldn't. It wasn't in his character. It's easy to be the pitchman when things are going well for the average Joe, too. But those days are gone. The robber barons have gotten more greedy and vastly more wealthy. And we're more and more aware of the ways in which they're fleecing us. So the bread and circuses have to be, by necessity, all the more convoluted, all the more soap operatic and racist and captivating and surreal in order to keep our attention from how much we know about how bad it is, how the veil has been pulled away. So Trump wears so many ill-fitting hats: the savior, the carnival barker, the culture warrior, the economic guru. And somehow this laughably false anti-establishment elite that is surrounded by ultra wealthy elites. I guess it's our elites versus your elites. May the best money hoarder win. And these wealth addicts are all riding the tiger. How long will Trump bear the humiliation of Musk and others dictating policy to him via Twitter takedowns and tantrums? Does he go full Putin and start throwing them in the gulag? I've really been thinking that lately too. Wow. Um, they're swatting the hornet's nest or whatever you want to call it. Remember when he was the only candidate that didn't need big business donors? He wasn't taking a paycheck as president, too, and this meant that he was incorruptible. I guess those days are gone, or maybe they never were. I can't tell. Again, I'm not a historian and I'm not a political scientist. I guess he just needed to sell his bumpkin base that he would implement the racist policies that they wanted in order to win a majority for Musk, who lives off the government. How boring. And what will the people do when they realize they've been duped? Not only may Trump prove to be just like another politician, but they seem to have really wanted an authoritarian ethno-state. Maybe the Civil War comes not when Trump loses the election to Biden, but when Trump can't deliver. The plot thickens.